Today we're excited to introduce the Zenty 4K 60Hz 8x8 HDMI Matrix Switch with audio routing, a powerful and versatile solution for managing your audio and video needs. This device supports 8 HDMI input sources and 8 HDMI output displays, giving you full flexibility to route any source to any display. In addition to HDMI, the Matrix also includes 8 analog 3.5mm audio inputs, 8 analog 3.5mm audio outputs, and coaxial digital audio outputs, also known as SPDIF, making it a complete AV control hub. What truly sets this model apart is its advanced audio routing flexibility. Unlike traditional matrix switches, this unit allows you to independently manage audio through features like embedded audio, routed HDMI, and routed analog, each designed to give you maximum control across different environments and use cases. Whether you're setting up a home theater, a conference room, a restaurant, or a digital signage system, the Zenty Matrix delivers seamless switching and advanced audio routing capabilities for both audio and video. Later in this video, I'll walk you through several real-world use cases to demonstrate just how flexible and powerful the audio configurations can be. Alright guys, let's start with a quick rundown of the Zenty 8x8 Matrix Web GUI and what each tab on the left side is used for. Let's start with the status page. This section provides a comprehensive overview of both our inputs and output connections. For inputs, it displays details such as the active connections, the resolution, color format, audio format, and HTTP status. For output, you'll see information such as connected displays, their resolution, color format, audio format, and MFR, also known as manufacturer data. This overview gives you just a quick snapshot of the system's current configuration and signal details. So here is the HDMI Input tab. Here you can rename all your HDMI sources. You can turn the video signal on and off. And then right here, you can pick the right EDID settings to make sure that everything plays nicely with your connected devices. So here is the HDMI Output tab. We have all of our output displays. We can rename each output display. We can turn the video signal and audio signal on and off using these toggles. We have our HDMI audio source, and by default each one is set to routed HDMI, but we can drop down and select a specific HDMI source or also an analog in source. We also have the ARC functionalities, which we can toggle on and off, and then we have the ability to use CEC to power on and power off. Alright, so the primary routing matrix is where the real routing magic happens. On the left, we have all of our HDMI output displays. On the top, we have our HDMI sources. And the blue highlighted text represents what is currently selected. So right now, we have our input 1 source going out to our output 1 display. We have our 2 source going out to our 2 display, and so on and so forth. And these can be adjusted however you like. We can put our HDMI 1 source to all of our displays, and we can adjust it like that. The yellow highlighted text in brackets next to the HDMI output label represents the HDMI audio source we selected earlier on the HDMI output page. So right here, we have our sources, so I can select output 1 to play HDMI in 1, and you'll see now it says it right here. So we'll go over audio routing again in more detail later in this video. Now let's take a look at the Audio Matrix tab. This section allows you to route audio signals independently from video, directing them to your analog and coaxial, also known as SPDIF outputs. It's important to understand that each analog 3.5mm output is permanently linked to its matching SPDIF output. So for example, analog out 1 is always paired with SPDIF 1, analog out 2 with SPDIF 2, and so on and so forth. These groupings are fixed and cannot be changed or separated. At the top of the matrix, you'll see the audio output channels labeled audio out 1 to audio out 8, along with a global audio out on off toggle. This switch just allows you to enable or disable all of the audio outputs simultaneously. Each row in the matrix represents an available audio input, either from HDMI inputs 1 through 8 or analog audio inputs 1 through 8. By clicking any of these buttons in the matrix, you'll assign a specific input to a specific output. So for example, we could take analog in 1 and assign it to audio out 4, or we could take HDMI in 6 and assign it to audio out 2. At the bottom, you'll notice routed HDMI or routed analog. By default, routed HDMI is selected. Both of these options are dynamic and linked directly to the primary routing matrix page. This means that the audio output will automatically follow any of the video routing changes made on this page. I'll go into more detail about these routing modes and how they work shortly. Now let's take a look at the preset tab. This page allows you to save and quickly recall specific routing configurations, making it ideal for setups that repeat on a regular basis. There are 8 available presets, each with the option to rename, clear, save, or call the configuration. So for instance, let's say every Tuesday you have a big event that requires all outputs to display HDMI input 3 as the video source, but use HDMI input 6 for audio. You can configure that setup once, and then once that's configured, we can change this to rename it to Tuesday event, and just save it that one time, right? So once we have it configured, just hit save, and now it's saved on that specific configuration. And then now every Tuesday, all we have to do is hit call on preset 1, and then instantly activate that configuration across all outputs. There's no need to manually route each one ever again. The system page gives you access to basic network settings, along with account management tools for updating username and password. At the bottom, you'll also find the system controls to reboot the device or perform a factory reset, either general or user specific. This is where you go for essential administrative and maintenance tasks. Now let's dive into the audio routing capabilities of this unit. The goal here is to highlight some of the powerful and flexible audio options available and to break down how both routed HDMI and routed analog work. Just a quick reminder before we dive in, each analog 3.5mm output, SPDIF output, and HDMI output is tied together by port number. So for example, analog out 1, SPDIF 1, and HDMI 1 correspond to output 1. However, it's important to note that only analog and SPDIF output share the same audio signal. Although the HDMI output appears to be grouped with them, it can be assigned a completely different audio source via the HDMI output tab. Alright, so starting off with our first use case, let's say that you want to do some basic audio embedding. So you have, your display. So let's just say in this case, it's output 1, which is our lounge TV. You want to have your video source on HDMI input 1, which is a football game. And you want to embed audio from HDMI input 2, which is a music source. I'll walk us through how we can get that configured on the web UI. Alright, so looking at our web page, I've went ahead and renamed our input 1 and input 2 to a football game and music source. If we come down to our HDMI output, I've relabeled our output 1 to lounge TV. And if you could see, our HDMI audio source is currently set to routed HDMI, which is the default setting. If we click on this, we can change this to the music source. So what that'll do is now the lounge TV will play the music source from input 2 source on top of the lounge TV HDMI. And if we go to primary routing matrix, we could see that the football game video source will play on the lounge TV since it's selected, and the music source has now been updated so to the music source. If we come down to audio matrix, we can then select on audio out 1 the music source. So this will then change the extracted analog and SPDIF audio to the music source as well. So just to clarify, this is for the SPDIF and analog audio out, and then the HDMI audio source is for the HDMI audio. It's important to note that since we've embedded the music source, HDMI audio source, on top of our output 1 lounge TV, that when we go to the primary routing matrix and we change our input source on top of the lounge TV, the music source will stay embedded on top of all of our input sources. So for example, if we select input 3, which is a movie, the music source will continue playing on top of the movie video source. Let's say that you want to set up the 8x8 matrix to do traditional audio video routing. The routed HDMI, which is set by default, is what we're looking for. Let's say that we still have our output 1 as lounge TV, and we want to change our input 3, which is the Fast and Furious movie, and we want to swap to input 4, which is a basketball game, and we want both audio and video to change simultaneously, right? So looking at our HDMI output, we want to make sure that the output 1 lounge TV is set to routed HDMI. So this is just controlling our HDMI audio to change simultaneously with the video. We also want to make sure our audio matrix is then set to routed HDMI on audio out 1. And this is to make sure that the analog and SPDIF audio is also simultaneously changing with a video source. So when we come to primary routing matrix and we want to change our Fast and Furious movie on input 3 to the basketball game, we'll just change it on our lounge TV output. And now both the Fast and Furious video and audio will then change to the basketball game video and audio. So routed HDMI just allows us to change between our input sources on our outputs and simultaneously change the audio and video. So there's no embedding going on. And so for now, if we switch to football game, both the audio and video will change from the basketball game to the football game. And then we can go back to the movie, and now again, the Fast and Furious movie will play, and we get both audio and video. Now let's take a look at routed analog. Routed analog works similarly to routed HDMI, except it allows embedded analog audio to follow the HDMI input signal automatically. It's especially useful when you want to pair external analog audio with a video from a specific HDMI source. So let's say when routed analog is enabled, the analog input is dynamically linked to the HDMI input. So what this means is that analog input 1 will be tied to HDMI input 1, analog input 2 will be tied to HDMI input 2, analog input 3 will be tied to HDMI in 3, and so on and so forth. So for this use case, we'll still have our output 1 be our lounge TV. We'll have a video HDMI input 1 be a football game, and the analog input 1 tied to that football game would be the music player. We'll have an HDMI input 2 be our computer, and then an analog input 2 be a microphone input that will be tied to the computer. Going back to our web page, if we go to our HDMI audio source and change this to routed analog for our lounge TV, and we go down to audio matrix and change the audio out 1 to routed analog. When we go to our primary routing matrix page, we can see that currently we have our football game playing on our lounge TV. So what this means is that we have our football game with the analog input 1 music player, embedded audio on top. We can then change that to our HDMI input 2, which is our computer source on the lounge TV. And so now we get our computer with the analog input 2 embedded audio, which is our microphone, embedded on top of our computer video, playing on our lounge TV. Now let's say, for example, that we do not have any analog input 3 for our movie. If we select movie, we'll see the movie video on our lounge TV, but since we do not have any analog in, we will not hear any audio. That's it for our 4K 60Hz 8x8 HDMI Matrix Switch with audio routing. Have questions about the 8x8 Matrix or want to see more use case examples? Drop them in the comments below. For product details, specs, and support, check out the link in the description. See you in the next video.